Government promises more peelers on patrol. West Yorkshire Police has come under fire for blocking white people from applying for new jobs in what could all be an unlawful policy. Plus, the government's fundamental pillar of its growth strategy is facing its biggest threat yet. Yes, environmentalism. For tonight's finale, I'll be joined by Britain's costliest NIMBY campaigner. Find out just how much one man could cost the taxpayer. State of the Nation starts now. Well, it's a pleasure to have your company this evening. I should say that I'll be joined throughout this evening's discussions by the former Conservative MP Alex Stafford and the Labour activist Chris Worrell. Well, as ever, do let me know your views on all the topics we cover this evening. gbnews.com/your say is the way to get involved. But before we dive into what is sure to be a pretty exciting programme, let's get the very latest headlines with Sam Francis. Tom, thank you, and good evening to you. Just after 8 o'clock, the top story, well, better and stronger than ever before. That's Donald Trump's latest promise as the trade war with China deepens and markets tumble. Speaking at a cabinet meeting earlier, the president said the United States is very close to securing its first post-tariff trade deal, but warned that if no agreements are reached by the end of the 90-day pause, higher tariffs, well, they will return. Trump confirmed no country or company will be granted exemptions and said revenue from the tariffs will go toward debt reduction, tax cuts and border funding. He also insisted US steel would soon be thriving again, but markets, well, they told a different story. The Dow fell 3%, the S&P 500 dropped 4.8% and the Nasdaq sinking 5.6% earlier today. It came as the White House confirmed total tariffs on Chinese goods now stand at 145%, with Beijing responding with 84% levies of its own. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer has defended the UK's decision not to retaliate against Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs, insisting it's not left Britain in a disadvantaged position. The Prime Minister says avoiding a trade war was in everyone's interest, adding there's no business or sector calling for retaliation. Pressed on Donald Trump's recent comments that countries were lining up to strike trade deals, he said it was vital to maintain a calm and pragmatic relationship with UK's closest ally. Chancellor Rachel Reeves is understood to be raising that issue in Washington later this month. The Prime Minister has announced a number of neighbourhood police officers will rise by 3,000 by early next year. It's part of a wider pledge to deliver 13,000 new neighbourhood officers by 2029. Aimed, he says, at tackling antisocial behaviour and restoring visible policing. It means that from July, every neighbourhood will have a named contactable officer and guaranteed patrols in town centres at peak times. The public will also be able to trace and track the performance of their local policing teams online. Well, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says the culture of crime must end.
So determined to rebuild neighbourhood policing and over the course of the Parliament to deliver 13,000 more neighbourhood police and PCSOs, which will be a more than 50% increase in neighbourhood policing. There's the additional plans for neighbourhood policing in every region and restoring that principle of officers and PCSOs who know their local communities, work with local businesses and communities to solve problems and prevent crimes and to target repeat offenders and gather that intelligence to convict criminals and get justice.
That's your 3-minute bulletin here on GB News. I'll be back with you at the top of the hour. Now, though, it's back to Tom.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening and welcome back to State of the Nation. Now, it feels like a lifetime ago when the government was battling off calls for a national inquiry into rape gangs, only for the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, to then issue this statement in January.
So Tom Crowther, KC, chair of the Telford inquiry, has agreed to work with the government to develop a new framework for victim-centred, locally led inquiries.
Locally led inquiries. But then on Tuesday, things seemed to take a turn. The Home Office Minister, Jess Phillips, appeared to row back on that initial inquiry plan, following feedback from local authorities.
We'll set out the process through which local authorities can access the £5 million national fund to support locally led work on grooming gangs. Following feedback from local authorities, the fund will adopt a flexible approach to support both full independent local inquiries and more bespoke work.
Shall we just take a second to think about that? The local authorities that were going to hold inquiries, that perhaps should have been investigated themselves, have given feedback that they shouldn't be investigated after all. Yes, the decision to water down an already seemingly watered-down approach was met by much furore, not just from the media, but from many of Labour's own Red Wall MPs too, perhaps thanks to pressure on them and indeed the government. So today, the government briefed GBNews, claiming it wasn't watering down local inquiries, that there could be more than the original 5 on an opt-in basis. This chaos, this constantly oscillating position on grooming gang inquiries really begs the question, is their heart really in it? Or do they need their feet held to the fire every step of the way on this issue? Well, earlier, the rape gang survivor Ellie Reynolds had this to say to Martin Daubney when he asked her what her message would be to the Labour government.
Well, an email was sent to Jess Phillips, who did arrange to meet with me, but this was a couple of months ago and I've heard nothing since. My message would be, I really feel like people need to start taking the victims more seriously.
Profound thing to say and something I'm thinking we can all agree with. But what on earth is going on at the top of government? I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by the Mail on Sunday columnist Dan Hodges. Dan, thanks for joining us. I have been struggling to understand what on earth is going on. What's your view with how Jess Phillips, Yvette Cooper and the rest of the Home Office team are actually approaching this issue?
Well, we have to remember that the government didn't want any investigation at all. It was only after Oldham Council approached the government asking for government support for an inquiry, and that was rejected, and that's how the controversy exploded. So when Yvette Cooper announced the 5 local inquiries, that was essentially a panicked measure by the government and an attempt to shut down the issue. And what we saw earlier in the week was an attempt to back off further from that commitment by sort of bundling out or sneaking out this announcement just on the eve of recess. The reality is that the government, for various political reasons, doesn't want any sort of investigation into this scandal at all.
Now, there are various political reasons that you allude to there. Could one of them be an electoral issue that the government faces? The fact that it lost, surprisingly, a couple of MPs to so-called Gaza independents at the last election, and that many more of its top team, I'm thinking Jess Phillips, the Home Office Minister herself in Birmingham Yardley, or indeed Wes Streeting in Ilford, these were MPs at the top table of the Labour government who almost lost their seats to independent candidates focused on Muslim issues. Could this be influencing their behaviour?
Oh, it definitely is. I mean, it's effectively the primary reason why the government is so scared of this issue. As you actually said, the perception, well, it's not just a perception, it's a reality. Elements of Labour's traditional Muslim base are rebelling and turning away from Labour, primarily because of what's perceived to be Labour's inadequate stance on Gaza. In the election, as you rightly pointed out, Jess Phillips herself, who obviously is the minister responsible for this, came very close to losing her seat. Obviously, this was in an election where Labour swept the country. And that is the primary political factor. I mean, the other factor, I mean, as you accurately pointed out, we've now got this absolutely ridiculous situation where local authorities are being invited to opt in to an investigation into their own failings and their own failure to tackle this crisis. And the majority of those local authorities will be Labour local authorities. And I mean, the other thing is, we saw on the clip at the start of the programme, Yvette Cooper announcing that Tom Crowther, this independent QC, would be in charge of putting in place the framework for these local inquiries. Tom Crowther himself turned up in the House of Commons last week and revealed that a couple of weeks ago, he actually had to phone up the Home Office and say to the Home Office, do you still want me? Because nothing was happening. So at every stage, as you said, the government has simply been dragging its feet for the political reasons you described.
Well, the contention here is that unless it's spoken about on programmes like this, unless the media does its job in sort of keeping this issue at the forefront of people's minds, the government would be more than happy for it to sort of fade away and nothing to be done.
Absolutely. And as I said, that's precisely why the government made the announcement on the last possible day before recess, because it was attempting to sneak the announcement out. Keir Starmer was appearing before the liaison committee on the same day. Obviously, everyone's attention was focused on Trump and the tariffs. And so, effectively, the government thought that was a good day to basically bury the grooming gangs investigation, and that's something they've been trying to do. Now, they've been caught, and Yvette Cooper is desperately trying to backtrack. But even today, Yvette Cooper did a series of interviews today, and what was noticeable, in none of the interviews that Yvette Cooper did today did she use the phrase 5 inquiries. She never used that number, because, as you said, the government has decided to effectively give the local authorities a veto over whether or not they participate in these inquiries.
And this is extraordinary. The only inquiry that seems to be going on at a local level is the Oldham inquiry. And Oldham was a local authority that changed party in terms of the party that was running it. It was a Labour authority. They lost a bunch of seats. A new executive came in. Now, a new executive is perfectly happy to investigate the old guys who were in charge at the time of the crisis. But that, sadly, is not the case across the board in so many of these towns. I mean, everywhere across the country, we at GBNews have found over 50 towns with solid evidence that this is happening in. Not 5, 50. Likely far, far more. If the local authorities actually have to opt in effect, to investigate themselves, their police forces, their executive cabinet ministers, and indeed their friends, it's hard to see how actually we're going to get to the bottom of this.
It is. I mean, you've touched on a very interesting point there. I mean, again, this is the contradiction. Yvette Cooper was doing the TV round today, doing the broadcast round, and she said, as you've just said, there's an inquiry going on into Oldham. Right, that is proceeding. She then said, but we've got to wait until we get this framework in place before we start looking at the inquiries in other areas. Now, if they've already got a framework established which is now enabling the Oldham inquiry to go ahead, all you do is you take that framework and then you extend that elsewhere. And it's quite obvious then that is evidence of the fact that they're not really committed to this. But look, the reality is, we shouldn't be talking about local inquiries at all. This is one of the most disgusting and disgraceful national scandals in British history. There should be a national inquiry taking place. All this scrabbling around over, well, maybe we'll have some sort of local inquiry here, or maybe one there, or not, or local authorities can opt in, opt out. We need a national inquiry in which, as you said, the scale of the problem, over 50 separate towns, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of victims. And the key thing is, we need someone with the authority to actually force people under oath to give evidence that we can finally get to the bottom of all this. And that's
the power of a statutory inquiry, where witnesses can be compelled and the local inquiries can't do that. Dan Hodges, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for keeping this conversation alive. It is so, so necessary. And thank you for all the work that you're doing too. Well, after the break, I'll be speaking with an economist who was unwittingly behind the Trump administration's trade war. We'll take his verdict, his revealing verdict, very, very shortly indeed. You won't want to miss it.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
It's all kicking off in the world of bowling because an historic bowls club could be forced to close after a staggering 2,000% parking fee hike. Members, many of them of course elderly, say they can't afford the jump from 40 quid to an astonishing £840. Now for some, the club is their social lifeline, but the council insists that the change is necessary to ease financial pressures. Well, of course they would. Well, joining me now to discuss this is the club captain of Eastbourne Parade Bowls Club, Pete Hensman. Pete, welcome to the show. This is an astonishing hike in the car parking costs. It must have simply bowled you all over.
Yeah, to use a phrase, you're quite right. We sort of staggered and worried because of the possibility of closing us.
What's the reaction been within the club to what seems like an eye-watering increase?
Well, as you said, several of our members are saying, we just can't join, we can't afford it. The bus service around here is not particularly good, and they can't carry their bowls or get to the club.
And you've been around since 1897. You've got 70 members, got some wonderful pictures there on screens, look, of people just getting together. Absolutely wonderful thing to do. Healthy, physically, healthy mentally. And of course, a lot of people lose more friends as they get on. Have the council been remotely forthcoming in seeing the light?
I think they've got a bit of a panic on. We got a message inviting us to join the chairman of the council tomorrow to discuss the matter. I hope we're going to get a compromise.
GB News.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, welcome back to State of the Nation. My name's Tom Harwood. The time is 18 minutes past 8. Now, one of the key economists behind the research papers that justified President Trump's unprecedented hike in tariffs is a man called Pau Pujolas, an economist from McMaster University in Ontario, Canada. His involvement came as much of a shock to him as the rest of us. Well, he'll be briefly joining us in just a moment's time. President Trump, of course, has since announced a 90-day suspension on many of the tariffs he unveiled just a week ago, after what can only be described as terror in the global stock markets. This decision came after warnings that the tariffs could push the global economy into a tailspin. Let's just have a listen to what Donald Trump had to say in response.
People were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, you know? They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid, unlike these champions, because we have a big job to do. No other president would have done what I did. No other president. I know the presidents. They wouldn't have done it.
Well, how have you been feeling? Have you been yippy? Or have you avoided being a panican? Well, the pause is intended to create breathing room for fresh negotiations on trade terms, but Donald Trump immediately cranked up tariffs on Chinese imports, up to a staggering 145%, more than a 40-point increase from the 104% rate they previously were at. But what does the unintentional brain behind the operation think? Well, I'm delighted to be joined by the economist at McMaster University in Ontario, Pau Pujolas. Pau, thanks so much for being with us here this evening. Firstly, did you know that the Trump administration would be citing your work before they announced all of these tariffs?
No, it was a surprise. The paper had some minor impact within the academic community when we put it out in the fall, because it was speaking to something that President Trump was touting. But I did not expect the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors to reflect the findings of that paper in his recent speech. That was a complete shock. And
what was it that your paper actually said? Why did the chairman of Trump's Council of Economic Advisors enjoy your work so much?
This is something that we discovered new, my co-author and myself, that had been overlooked by the literature. And the finding is that in the presence of a bilateral trade deficit, there are an extra added incentive by countries to start a trade war. And the paper itself was meant as a warning. It was meant as a warning because given that this is a fact, given that now we know that trade deficits may entice countries to start trade wars, we would hope, we would expect that multilateral organizations like the IMF, the WTO, will do something about that, will try to double down on their pressure for countries to lower tariffs and not start trade wars, and be vigilant particularly of those countries that have big trade imbalances with their trading partners. What we did not expect
Pau,
is...
sorry, just to be clear, you're describing your paper as a warning, saying that this is what could happen if tariff barriers aren't brought down. And instead, the Trump organization, the Trump White House, took your warning and read it almost 180 degrees incorrectly to say that you were almost advocating an outcome that you described as inadvisory.
Well, I mean, when the folks at the beginning of the 20th century were starting to figure out radiation, that finding could lead to two very different things. On the one hand, it could have led to curing cancer, and that was great. And on the other hand, it could lead to the atomic bomb, and that was a disaster. If you were going back to them and you told them about the first one, they'd be happy. The second one, they'd be sad. So on a similar vein, what my colleague and I did was just discover something that was unknown, that trade deficits affect the way in which we should think about trade wars. That's the finding. Now, this finding can be used in different ways. We were hoping that it would be used in a preemptive way to prevent future escalations and future trade wars. It has been used to justify one.
Goodness me. Well, Pau Pujolas, thanks so much for joining us and explaining what must have been a pretty absurd week, really, in your life, finding your work justifying something that has rocked the global economy. Thanks indeed for joining us and for explaining your side of the story. Well, I'm delighted to now be joined by Richard Hanania, a writer, commentator and president of the Centre for the Study of Partisanship and Ideology over in the United States. Richard, thanks for joining us this evening. I'm interested in your take on this, particularly as you're someone who voted for Donald Trump, if I'm correct, but have been writing pretty scathing analyses of the last 7 days in American politics.
Yeah, so I did not expect tariffs to this extent. I think I was not alone in that judgment. I think the markets, well, you've seen what's been happening to the markets. They thought that the Republican winning, as is often the case, would be good for economic growth. The stock market was doing pretty well. And then we started heading downwards when it seemed like he was serious about tariffs, when he started doing these tariffs on Canada and Mexico. And then when he had the Liberation Day, I mean, this the so-called Liberation Day last week, there was, up to the moment he got up there and started reading those completely, nonsense numbers on that chart, nobody was really expecting anything to this extent. I mean, the effective tariff rate in Trump's first administration went up a few points, went up from something like 2 to like 4% or something like that. Really not enough to kind of crash the economy. But this is something different. We're talking about 10% minimum on each country. this is the case even after this recent 90-day pause, and then much higher on a lot of places. China now over 100%, 30-40% on a lot of different nations. And this is, I mean, I think that basically in the last week or so, we've seen the confirmation of every person who thought that the Trump was potentially disastrous for the country and the movement that he was leading had gone off the rails. I think that their views have been pretty much confirmed. I mean, he woke up one day, we've had a decline in the stock market until he moved back a little bit and it went back up a little bit. But basically, this is a COVID-style shock for no reason.
This is the interesting point that I wanted to press you on, perhaps. What was the original idea behind these tariffs? Because you listen to some people in the Trump administration, they're saying this is all about a new way of generating revenue, shifting away from income tax and towards import duties instead, clearing out the US national debt. And we've seen, perhaps in the last few days, how important it is for America to be less indebted, because the amount that America's over-leveraged has perhaps forced the president into a U-turn in some strange ways. But there were others who say that the tariffs were all about forcing other countries to eventually tear down their trade barriers, to come to the table, to negotiate new great trade deals. Which is it?
So if you watch the Trump advisors and people in the administration, you watch 4 different advisors, you'll get 4 different stories about the tariffs and what they're supposed to do. Every one of these advisors, the only thing they will agree on is whatever Donald Trump did last was absolutely brilliant, and he's a great negotiator, and everything is working out great. And if it looks like it's not working out great, that's all part of the plan, and it's just kind of a temporary setback. You're absolutely right. These things kind of contradict the idea that they're going to raise a lot of money. Well, if they're going to raise a lot of money, then you're expecting a large amount of trade. If you want manufacturing to come back, then you're expecting the tariffs to cut off trade, to make us more isolationist. So what was actually going on in Donald Trump's head? It's really hard to say. I mean, the first administration, there was pushback from people around him. In the second administration, I think they've been selecting over time for people who really are not going to push back against Trump no matter what he does. And I think it's, he sort of said this. It's just kind of instinct at this point.
How influential do you think people like Elon Musk have been with regard to this apparent U-turn? Of course, he effectively went to war with the chief trade advisor over the last few days.
So I think Elon Musk matters, and I think that Trump talked about seeing Jamie Dimon on TV and caring about that. I do think, though, that the opinions of these guys, Musk and Dimon, without what happened to the stock market and the bond market, I don't think it would have been worth all that much. I mean, I think Trump has given Elon Musk a lot of power, obviously. Doge, he's basically given him free reign over the federal government to try to remake it. But when Trump wants to ignore him, Trump can't ignore him. And if public opinion is with Trump, and if things are otherwise going well, he has the freedom to ignore Elon Musk. So maybe a little bit.
As long as the stock market line is going up, Donald Trump seems to be happy, but it's a bit harder, especially when government debt is becoming more expensive to service. Something many economists are saying are equivalent to the Liz Truss moment that we had over here in the United Kingdom. But Richard Hanania, always interesting to hear what you have to say. Thank you indeed for joining us here on State of the Nation this evening. Well, coming up in just a moment, the Prime Minister says that police funding could be cut unless patrols increase in busy areas from July. But on the very same day, West Yorkshire Police is criticised for halting white British applications, all to boost diversity in the force. But if we need more officers, why block white people from joining?
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
Storm Olivier is making its way across Portugal and Spain, bringing some heavy rain and strong winds, continuing as we go into Friday. Some places seeing around a month's worth of rain in just a day or so. A little bit dry as we go further east. In fact, across Italy, Friday's looking largely fine with some decent sunshine. Also mostly dry for Greece, but here temperatures are well below average. In some places, they're around 10 degrees below. A mixed picture as we go through the weekend and into next week. Bye-bye.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off-limits. You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless. But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show. Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good evening to you. Welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Tom Harwood, at 33 minutes past 8. Now, the Prime Minister has announced plans to increase the number of police on the beat by suggesting he will withdraw funding unless there are more patrols in town centres. Beginning in July, every police force will be expected to provide patrols in town centres and other hotspot locations during busy periods, including Friday and Saturday nights in urban areas and market days in rural areas. However, it's also been revealed that West Yorkshire Police has temporarily stopped applications from white British candidates, all in an attempt to boost diversity, prompting allegations of racism against white people. Well, let's discuss this now. Delighted to be joined by my panel, the former Conservative Member of Parliament Alexander Stafford and the Labour activist Chris Worrell. Alexander, we're going to start with you. I mean, this is the most extraordinary story to read.
Yes, that's absolutely crazy. Why are we discriminating against anyone? If there's a failure to get people from ethnic minorities into the police force, that's a failure of the police force reaching out to the communities or trying to sell the police force and making an attractive career. Not banning white people, banning anyone. This is absolutely crazy. And at the same time, you're saying they're wanting to increase police patrols. The only way you can do that is increase police numbers. We shouldn't be pushing people off. But also, what sort of message does it send to the white officers already in the police force? It says to them, actually, we don't actually care about you. What are your chances for promotion or future advancement? Because actually, you haven't got a future. So I'm sure this will actually lead to more white police officers actually leaving the police force. They don't feel like they can be looked after so much. But is that what they want? Is that they're trying to force out some white people? I don't know. It's very odd what's going on.
Well, what West Yorkshire Police say is that they represent a very diverse area. West Yorkshire has many towns and cities that have well above average ethnic minority populations, but the police force is overwhelmingly white. Chris Worrell, do they have a point that the police force should look like the community it polices?
Yeah, and I think diversity policies are there to sort of enhance the pool of talent. I think that's the original aim. The Equality Act does set out provisions, for civil racism cases. We've seen it before in Cheshire in 2019. I think it was the RAF there was issues in 2023, and then I think even recently as last year, Thames Valley, all white people who were, discriminated against.
And this is the Equality Act that protects white people to equal chance of employment, and these are various forces being found against under that legislation.
Well, these are cases that are found to have breached the Act. So, there is guidance that the police put out that says you must not lead to positive discrimination, but you've clearly got some people in these police forces who haven't got the memo. I mean, you can't be having a game of musical chairs and some people can't hear the music. It's just insane. So I think what we're seeing is here, that thing to take away is that there is going to be more money put into the police, 13,000 by 2029, and that should be, highly regarded as a positive move.
But this is such a fundamental issue of fairness, of equality of opportunity, of fair play. And yet, time and time again, we do see so many schemes like this, not just in the police, but across the whole of civil society, where there will be a job offer or a recruitment drive for one specific race over another. I find it hard to see how we see this so often when it seems like, on the face of it, this stuff is illegal.
Well, it's clear discrimination. It's clear discrimination of white people. We shouldn't be discriminating against anyone. And over the last few months, we've already had conversations about so-called two-tier care and two-tier policing already, and suddenly we're making two-tier police applications as well. We're dividing this country rather than bringing people together. And to me, this is a failure of the police forces, who I believe should be more reflective of their communities, actually having positive ways to go out to reach those community members, try and get them involved in the police force, but instead they're sort of banning part of the community. This is completely topsy-turvy and sends completely the wrong message out to communities across the country.
Do you think the government, Chris Worrell, should be speaking up for the young white people in West Yorkshire who are being denied opportunities? I mean, I know that there is a big political taboo on getting involved in operational police matters, but surely this is an area where the Home Office and indeed the Prime Minister should have something to say.
Well, I think the College of Policing should be sort of making sure that all of these police forces are not indirectly discriminating. There is laws in place to prevent this from happening, and as we've seen, it's been going on for a number of years that these cases have arisen. You would have thought that, particularly after our RAF case, where I think it was 31 white people were discriminated against, that some of these forces would have got their house in order. But at the end of the day, we should be, if I was going to be a white lad applying to be a ROSA, and they feel that those policies are discriminating against them, there is the processes in place to make sure that that is called out and they get the public apology that is in legislation they deserve, as well as compensation.
Yeah, Alexandra, I just wonder, given that this is something that has hit the news today, how many of these sort of discriminatory hiring practices are there going on in this country that don't hit the news? I mean, it does seem like this has sort of taken West Yorkshire Police aback a bit, that they thought that they were doing something incredibly normal. It just so happened there was a whistleblower in this case. But this could be much, much wider across the country.
Oh, it could be hugely wide. But also got to remember, the most discriminated, or rather most disadvantaged, group across the country are white working-class boys on free school meals. All the studies show they're the socioeconomic group that are most disadvantaged. And yet we're putting more disadvantages, like the West Yorkshire Police or other groups, saying, actually, you cannot get this job. So if I was a white working-class boy on free school meals in West Yorkshire, suddenly an opportunity to get a good job, a solid job, and member of the community is now being taken away from me. What message does that send? How can that actually progress the white working class boys?
But why did you do it in 2023 when the RAF had these issues? What about 2019? These problems have been around for a while. And, what was the Tories doing in stepping up? And we're seeing this has clearly been recognised, and there is investment being put into the police force. So you would hope that, we can learn from these mistakes. It's just been going on for 6 years, which is an issue for me.
Well, I think there should be a clear message from the Home Secretary to all police forces tomorrow or whenever the House comes back to sit saying you cannot have these practices. And our police should look at everyone indiscriminately, justice should be blind and should get rid of these practices. I need a message from the Home Secretary saying should not be allowed. I don't want to do this.
It isn't allowed, though. So it's followed. The laws are there.
And just a final note to you, Alexander, even if this does breach this sort of convention that there seems to have been grown up around not interfering with the operational duties of the police, this sort of Chinese wall that must exist between politicians and the police, should we poke holes in that?
No, this is complete nonsense. Time and time again, of all political parties have got involved in policing matters, whether it's what sort of police force they want, what crimes they look at. This is exactly what the Home Secretary or any Home Secretary should be sending a clear message down to the rozzers on the ground.
OK. Alexander Safford and indeed Chris Worrell, thanks indeed for talking through that issue for us. After the break, it's been the moment that I've been most looking forward to in this programme, perhaps many of you too. We'll be speaking to the costliest NIMBY in the country, revealing how much just one man could cost the taxpayer in delaying road projects. Why is all our infrastructure so slow and so expensive? Stay tuned to find out.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It could be quite a foggy start for some of us tomorrow, particularly across the south, but this should clear quite readily through the morning, leaving another fine day, lots of warm sunshine on offer, and it's all thanks to this area of high pressure. At times this has swung some lower cloud across eastern areas, but we're seeing a change in our wind direction to more northwesterly feeds. So that means many areas are going to see a bright end to the week. As we head into this evening, some lingering cloud across East Anglian coasts of Kent may just drift its way southwards, bringing some fog across southern coasts in particular. Also plenty of cloud moving into northern parts of Scotland. That might be thick enough to produce some drizzle across parts of Shetland. But for many, it's going to be a dry night, feeling fairly chilly, not quite as cold as recent nights. And it's likely we'll see some mist and fog patches across rural areas across the country as well. So to start the day tomorrow across Scotland, a fair amount of cloud, particularly across northern areas. Elsewhere across Scotland, higher based clouds, so it might just make the sunshine as it comes up turn a little bit hazy. Fairly clear across Northern Ireland and northern parts of England. Similar elsewhere across Wales, central and southern parts too. Perhaps a little bit chilly and, like I said, some mist and fog to start, particularly across southern counties. But it's clearing quite readily through the course of the morning, and that should leave a fine day on offer. Wall-to-wall sunshine for many of us and feeling very warm in that sunshine too. The only exception is the very far north of Scotland. More cloud here, some drizzly outbreaks, particularly across Shetland and possibly Orkney later, and a bit breezier here too. But elsewhere, lighter winds, warm sunshine, highs likely reaching around 22 to 23 degrees Celsius. Now, I'm afraid a change is on its way over the weekend. There will still be plenty of dry weather, some sunnier outbreaks, but it's likely we'll start to see more clouds start to push in from the southwest, and there's a chance we could see some showery outbreaks too. And similar across the very far northwest of the country, more cloud here and some showers. And on Sunday, these showers likely more widespread, and it's going to be feeling significantly cooler too. Bye-bye.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, welcome back to State of the Nation with me, Tom Harwood. The time is coming up to 8:45. Well, at the heart of the government's plan for growth is, of course, making it easier to build things in Britain, which is why today's news that 32 environmental organisations have begun a campaign against the government's flagship Planning and Infrastructure Bill, warning it may erode wildlife protection, serves as a potential blow to Labour's hopes of restoring economic growth to this country. But before we get into that, have you noticed how it's taken longer than ever and cost more money than ever to build new road or indeed rail projects in this country? Well, one man is proud to have played a large part in some of that. Let me introduce you to the man who's been dubbed as the UK's costliest NIMBY. That stands for Not in My Backyard. Yes, Chris Todd leads the Transport Action Network, a group dedicated to opposing new road projects. Mr. Todd has become one of the UK's costly anti-road campaigners. His legal challenges against road schemes have all failed, but they have delayed projects worth billions of pounds. This adds hundreds of millions to taxpayer costs. Well, I'm delighted to say we can speak to the man himself tonight. I'm joined by Britain's costliest NIMBY, Chris Todd. Chris, thanks for speaking to us. I've got to ask you one simple question. Why?
Hello, Tom. Thanks for having me on. Well, I think it's quite simple. We don't like waste, and the government is inherently wasteful in a lot of the projects that it pursues, and particularly when it's been recommended by National Highways. And by investing in or putting money into some of these big road schemes, which will actually bring less benefits than they cost to build, you're denying benefits, greater benefits happening elsewhere around the country. So, take the Lower Thames crossing as an example. It's barely going to wash its face in terms of costs. It's only going to provide 5 years of temporary relief at Dartford. Yet if you put that money into other forms of transport, you get far greater returns. I mean,
Chris, isn't this the ingenuity of your campaigning? You're campaigning by taking out, I hope you won't mind me saying, spurious legal challenges against road projects. None of your legal challenges have been successful, but all of your legal challenges have added cost to projects. Now, by very definition, that makes those projects more expensive. That makes the return on those projects less compared to the money that has been put in. I mean, it's a very clever way to then say, look, suddenly all these road projects are far too expensive, we've got to cancel them. I mean, they're more expensive because of the action you've taken.
Possibly some schemes are because of the action we've taken, but we've only taken action against 2 schemes. I mean, if you look at the M3 Junction 9 scheme, which was recently started, 2 years after National Highways said the cost was going to be 215 million, it had shot up to 290 million. There were no legal challenges, there were no other delays. So National Highways was either hiding the true costs or it was being dishonest. And that's...
Chris, we've seen with regard to the Lower Thames crossing, which you mentioned earlier, we've seen regard to many road schemes, the dualling of the A1, all of these things. We've seen that what happens is that so many developers are afraid of campaigners like yourself who, for a very low fee, I think your fees are capped at £10,000 to take out a legal challenge. A legal challenge that could indeed cost tens of millions of pounds, even hundreds of millions of pounds cumulatively to these projects. In order to guard these projects against such legal challenges in the future, they then have to over-interpret the law, produce so many more environmental impact assessments than they otherwise would, gold plate the environmental credentials of their projects just to ward off those challenges. You don't even need to bring a challenge now. It's just the threat of one that will add cost.
No, I think it's more the incompetence of National Highways. I mean, they took 10 years developing road schemes from the south coast up to Liverpool, which got absolutely nowhere. I mean, that's the huge waste of money that we're seeing. And then the government then takes years and years to take a decision on road schemes after that. So the delay that we add, if we add any, and it's not that often, is very minuscule in comparison to the overall inefficiency of the whole system. And I don't think you can just pick on one part of it and say that's the problem. It's not by any means. And if we want to improve building and improving infrastructure in this country, we've got to look at making the right decisions at the start. And some of these are completely the wrong decisions, which is why then National Highways gets itself caught up in a twist and not actually in developing the roads, which no one has objected to in terms of legal challenges. So,
Chris, before I let you go, I've got a question I've got to ask you. Will you keep up your legal challenges against new road projects, even if you don't win a single one?
Well, we've lost 2 road schemes, but we've succeeded in other areas of legal challenge. We have two legal challenges outstanding at the moment in terms of funding for walking and cycling, and also one on roads policy. But that's different against schemes. If it's appropriate, we will do it, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to do it every time. It's not something we do easily, because despite what you were saying earlier, it is very costly and difficult for us to raise that sort of money. The amount you were talking is only the adverse cost, not the total cost that we would have to raise to pay for the legal challenge.
Although, of course, your adverse costs are capped. But Chris, Todd, thank you very much for joining us and talking through what has been a very spirited campaign of yours for the last 30 or so years. I'm delighted to be now joined by my panel, the former Conservative Member of Parliament Alexander Stafford and the Labour activist Chris Worrell. Chris, are you worried that people like Chris Todd will scupper the Labour government's plans to produce growth?
I think these people are, need to get a life. I mean, at the end of the day, we're go and do some train spotting. Like, why are you ambulance chasing road projects? Like, at the end of the day, they produce a significant amount of economic growth. We're seeing people like those try and attack planning reforms, but hopefully the things that are being put in place now, we've seen the nuclear changes amongst a number of other changes that are positive with the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework, that are going to sort of expedite house building, expedite infrastructure and expedite energy security.
Alexander, it's clear that under 14 years of Conservative-led government, the cost of projects, whether it's HS2, infamously, which I think trebled in costs, but also road projects like the Lower Thames Crossing, they soared and soared and soared in costs, mainly because of all of these extra environmental impact assessments and mitigations. Do you regret some of that time?
Well, you've got to look at the nuance to this conversation, clearly. When you look at the famous one, HS2 back tunnel, which I can't remember how many hundreds of millions that cost.
It ended up 121 million.
Absolutely crazy. You've got to buy everyone back from the country for that 3 times over. But when you look at some of the other projects Labour are doing, such as the massive amount of building on farmland, the solar panels going on across so much of this country's green, fertile farmland, is destroying the wildlife. And I think, actually, we should be saying we shouldn't be destroying our natural value, and our value, especially at the moment what's going on in Ukraine, is we can grow our crops. That, to me, is a huge worry. And it's not NIMBYism to say, I don't want my crops being taken away by solar panels produced in China. What is NIMBYism, though? People saying, I don't want necessarily the new road right next to me. It's very nuanced. We need to protect our wildlife, protect our farming, but also actually build for growth.
There is now a coalition growing on the Labour benches, well, at least one very vocal MP and some who are perhaps less vocal, that are trying to levy some of these new amendments to say that it shouldn't be too easy to build on farmland. I mean, this is the Labour Party potentially at war with itself.
No, it's a one-man band. It's the patron saint of stagnation. I think his name's Chris Hinchcliffe. He's a former lobbyist for the CPRE. The NIMBY madrasa of lobbying against house building.
I hear the housing minister is quite receptive to what he has to say.
Well, that'll be disappointing, but it wouldn't be surprising. I think the main thing we've got to worry about here is these ecological planning fatwas that the likes of Chris Hinchcliffe and the Gideon, the Lib Dem, and I think there's a Green Party person as well. We've seen the backlash against Chris Hinchcliffe. I think Izzy Waite from Labour Students has written a left foot forward admonishing it. Abi Diwali from the National Executive Committee on the Labour Party was also featured another left-leaning press release.
So you think this rebellion will be quashed when Parliament returns?
It should be, yeah. We're planning for growth, and I think these people are just going to have to be put to one side. They're not going to save the countryside. They're just going to make...
Final word to Alexander Stafford, very quickly.
I just think this is a slight misrepresentation of what's going on out there. So much of our good farmland is being destroyed by the so-called name of growth, but actually it's nothing. It's not going to do anything but boost communist China.
Well, this will be a massive battle when Parliament returns in 2 weeks' time, but I've got to hand you over to the massive battles that will appear on the one and only Patrick Christys show. Coming up next, over to you, Patrick.
Thank you very much, Tom. Big show tonight. Hamas lawyers. Well, I've been doing some digging on them. They've represented ISIS fighters, Taliban fighters, Al-Qaeda fighters, Albanian and Pakistani paedophiles. I'll be having a look into them. Birmingham Labour MP Liam Byrne has fled his rubbish-strewn, rat-infested constituency to go on a jolly in Japan. We have come into possession of some exclusive, secret pictures of Liam Byrne's Japanese adventure. Police officers are happy to do the Macarena at gay pride events and say salam alaikum to the Muslim community, but they've banned white police officers in West Yorkshire. I've got all that and much more. Tune in.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It could be quite a foggy start for some of us tomorrow, particularly across the south, but this should clear quite readily through the morning, leaving another fine day, lots of warm sunshine on offer, and it's all thanks to this area of high pressure. At times this has swung some lower cloud across eastern areas, but we're seeing a change in our wind direction to a more northwesterly feed, so that means many areas are going to see a bright end to the week. As we head into this evening, some lingering cloud across East Anglian coasts of Kent may just drift its way southwards, bringing some fog across southern coasts in particular. Also plenty of cloud moving into northern parts of Scotland. That might be thick enough to produce some drizzle across parts of Shetland. But for many, it's going to be a dry night, feeling fairly chilly, not quite as cold as recent nights. And it's likely we'll see some mist and fog patches across rural areas across the country as well. So to start the day tomorrow across Scotland, a fair amount of cloud, particularly across northern areas. Elsewhere across Scotland, higher based clouds, so it might just make the sunshine as it comes up turn a little bit hazy. Fairly clear across Northern Ireland and northern parts of England, similar elsewhere across Wales, central and southern parts too. Perhaps a little bit chilly and, like I said, some mist and fog to start, particularly across southern counties, but it's clearing quite readily through the course of the morning, and that should leave a fine day on offer. Wall-to-wall sunshine for many of us and feeling very warm in that sunshine too. The only exception is the very far north of Scotland. More cloud here, some drizzly outbreaks, particularly across Shetland and possibly Orkney later, and a bit breezier here too. But elsewhere, lighter winds, warm sunshine, highs likely reaching around 22 to 23 degrees Celsius. Now, I'm afraid a change is on its way over the weekend. There will still be plenty of dry weather, some sunnier outbreaks, but it's likely we'll start to see more clouds start to push in from the southwest, and there's a chance we could see some showery outbreaks too. And similar across the very far northwest of the country, more cloud here and some showers. And on Sunday, these showers likely more widespread, and it's going to be feeling significantly cooler too. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Courtesy of Marquis Leisure, you could be driving away with this brand new Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. It comfortably sleeps 4, comes with sky roof, integrated kitchen and bathroom, and is worth over £67,000. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that wherever this motorhome takes you, it takes you there in style. For a chance to win a motorhome and cash, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here We do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christys Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.